At the end of the section of the Torah that discusses the Soita, the Pasuk says, V'im loy nitma, if she did not become Tameh, V'im loy nitma isha, the woman did not become Tameh. With the Hoiri, she's pure. V'niksa, she will be cleansed, she will come out clean. V'nizra zora, and bear seed. The words V'nizra zera, Rashi translates after discussing what V'niksa means. And Rashi is going to say it means Mimayim Hama'ararim, as will be discussed a little bit later in the Sicha. So Rashi says that V'niksa V'nizra zera means that if up until now she was giving birth with pain, now she's going to have an easy birth. If up until now she was having dark-skinned children, she will now have light-skinned children. The Rebbe's question is, the source for Rashi is in the Sifri, the Gemara in Soita, as well as in the Tosefta, so too in Yerushalmi and in the Tanchuma. In all of these places there are other brachas brought as well. If she gave birth to girls till now, she will have boys. If she gave birth to short children, she will have, now from now on, she'll have tall children. In some places it also adds, if up until now she had births of one child, now she will have 2 children at birth. And if she was giving birth every second year, now she will give birth every year. So the question is, why is Rashi changing from all of these places and choosing just 2 of these things? That if she gave birth with pain, she will now give birth easily. And if it was dark-skinned children, she will have light-skinned children. The Rebbe points out that the Rambam, in fact, also brings only 2 of all of these things. Not exactly the same 2 that Rashi brings. He does bring, if she gave birth with pain, then now she will give birth easily. And the other one the Rambam brings is that if she gave birth to girls, she'll give birth to boys. We must say, says the Rebbe, that al derech hapshat, in the way of learning simple meaning of the psukim, which is Rashi's way, that Rashi interprets the Torah, as Rashi himself says, that loy bosi, I did not come besides for only pshutei shel mikra. We must say that from our pasuk, we can only infer these 2 brachos that he brings. In order to understand this, says the Rebbe, we'll first look at something else that seems to be a question. The simple translation of a nizra zera is that if she is pure, she will not only she won't have the punishment of her stomach swelling and her thigh falling, but rather she will have children. And that's the way many of the Mefarshim that explain Pshutei Shel Mikra explain the pasuk that Hashem will now give her children in payment for the disgrace, the embarrassment that she had. So how is it that Rashi, whose idea is Pshutei Shel Mikra, as we said, is translating V'nizra Azara, not that she's going to have children, but rather that she's going to have children easily, or that she'll have light-skinned children? The Rebbe says some Mefarshim suggest that in the Gemara and the Sifri there's actually a machloikas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva holds that V'niksa V'nizra Azara means that if she was a barren woman, she will now have children. Says Rabbi Yishmael, if that's the case, then all barren women will have a simple way of having children. They'll go into hiding, their husbands will warn them, and they'll come out clean because they didn't do anything. And now they'll have children. Instead, Rabbi Shmuel says, what does V'niksa V'nizra Zera mean? That if she was giving birth with pain, then it will come easily now, etc. So Mefarshim say that Rashi is not learning like Rabbi Akiva, that if she was barren, she's going to have children, because of this question of Rabbi Shmuel. That all the akaris, all the barren women will go and hide, and they will have an easy way of having children. And that's why he learns, like Rabbi Yishmael, that it's these other brachas for the women, but not actually having a child. But the Rebbe says, seemingly, this is very difficult to say that that's the reason of Rashi that's quoting, or that's using the explanation of Rabbi Yishmael because of this challenge to Rabbi Akiva. It's hard to say that. Why? Number one, says the Rebbe, this question, that if so, all the akaris, all the barren women are going to have an easy way to have children, they're going to go into hiding and then be able to have a child, is not such a difficult problem in Pshutei Shel Mikra, in the way of learning Al Derech HaPshat, because number one, the hiding itself is still not going to get them a child. They're also going to need that afterwards their husband needs to warn them. That's number one. Point number two, says the Rebbe, the actual idea of if so, everyone's going to go and hide, says the Rebbe, so what's so terrible? Why are we saying as if that's something so terrible that would happen that a kosher woman, a barren woman, or even maybe more than one barren woman will go ahead and do this in order to be zoichet, to be able to have a child. Zara chayiv kayama. Furthermore, says the Rebbe, on the other hand, the very same question could be asked of Rabbi Shmuel as well. As Tosfos, in fact, asks and remains with a question. All of those women that are giving birth with pain are all going to go into hiding, and now they'll be able to give birth easily. And Mefarshim, in fact, have a whole pilpul about this. How does this work? Next point, says the Rebbe, another problem. The question of Rabbi Yishmael, that if so, all the Akaros are going to go into hiding, that's only if you learn like Rabbi Akiva, that was speaking specifically about a barren woman that couldn't have children. So if barren children will have women, they're going to go into hiding and have children. But in other words, we're speaking about that it's only referring to, according to Rabbi Akiva, only a very specific case, an akara, a barren woman. Whereas the question that we were asking on Rashi is, since Torah speaks about the majority of women, and the majority of women are people that are women that could have children. So the question is, why isn't Rashi saying that V'nizra Azera, as referring to all women, is that the payment for her disgrace is that she will have a child? I'm not speaking about a barren woman having a child. It's obvious that even a woman that has children ready from before, another child is the greatest bracha in the world. The Rebbe says we also need to understand the beginning of the Rashi, which we mentioned before briefly, but the Rebbe is going to quote now. On the word v'niksa v'nizra azera, so the way Rashi starts is, v'niksa means she'll be cleansed, mimayim hama'oririm, from these waters that are causing the curse. V'loyed, and not only that, but v'nizra azera, she will have seed. And then Rashi continues with what we said before, with all the brachas that we said. The question is, what is Rashi teaching us? And why does Rashi need to tell us that v'niksa, she will be cleansed, means mimayim hama'oririm, from these water that bring a curse? It seems to be obvious. That is the simple translation of the word v'niksa. In fact, before, when the Kohen administered the oath to the woman, he said, v'im loisatis, if you did not do the Aveira, hinaki, you will be cleansed, mimei hamorim hama'orim o'ela, from these bitter waters that bring a curse. So the pasuk itself said that that's a translation of being cleansed, is from these waters. So what's Rashi telling us? So the Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi says that Rashi is trying to tell us that we shouldn't think that the word v'niksa is as a part of v'nizra azara, as it could seem simply in the pasuk that v'nizra azara is as a result of v'niksa. In other words, the meaning of the pasuk would then be, if we understood it that way, v'niksa, that she'll be cleansed from anything that holds back her birth, and therefore v'nizra azara, so now she'll be able to have children. So that's what we may have thought v'niksa v'nizra azara means. V'niksa as being cleansed from the things holding her back from birth. So Rashi is telling us, no, v'niksa means she'll be cleansed from these waters that bring a curse. In other words, she's going to be saved from this whole thing of her stomach swelling and her thigh falling. And then this point number 2 is v'nizra azara, that she will have a child in an easy way, etc. But the Rebbe says, seemingly, this is not understood. Number 1, why would we use then the term v'niksa to describe that she's being helped from all of those things that were blocking her giving birth, the problems that she had from before? The pasuk then should use an expression, v'nirpa, she will be cured from her problems, etc. More importantly, says the Rebbe, how can we even think that v'niksa means from the things that were holding back her birth, which then, what would end up being is, see, earlier on, the Kohen, as we said before, said, Hinaki mimei hamorim hama'orim o'ela, that you will be cleansed from these waters, and yet that is not being described when the pasuk is actually saying what's actually happening. Again, if we would say v'niksa, which Rashi doesn't say, v'niksa means mimayim hama'orim, so then we understand the Kohen said that's going to happen, and that's what happens. But if we would think that v'niksa might mean to hold back, that's removing anything that's holding back the woman from being able to have children, or easily, etc., then what happened with what the Kohen originally said? Then the pasuk didn't describe it. So why would we think that that's what the pasuk means? Isn't it obviously obvious, in other words, that the niksa means from the mayim ha'ma'orim, and then why does Rashi have to tell it us? The Rebbe now brings what the Gurariya says, and the Rebbe says this is also difficult. The Gurariya says that Rashi is trying to tell us that the word v'niksa shouldn't be understood as she will be innocent from punishment. Like in the pasuk v'nika ha'ish me'yavoin, that the man is free of sin. So we shouldn't translate the word v'niksa right now, that way. Rather, Rashi is telling us that v'niksa means from the water. But the Rebbe says that's also problematic, because since the pasuk clearly said, again, the Kohen said it to her before, Hinaki, you will be cleaned, mimei hamorim hama'orim o'ela, from these waters. So why would we think that the word v'niksa at the end of the same section would be referring to something else, that you will be cleansed from punishment or from sin. In order to understand this, says the Rebbe, Rashi is actually bothered by a very, very simple question in our psukim. And that is, in our pasuk, that is, since the Kohen, when he administered the oath to the woman, enumerated everything that's going to happen as a result of drinking these waters, both if no man lived with her, no man had relations with her, and also if she did an Aveira under her husband, while being married to her husband. So how is it that then when the pasuk is actually saying what all the things that actually happen, it seems to me the Torah is now saying a new thing that was not discussed before. That if she's innocent, v'nizra zera, she'll bear seed, which was not mentioned at all, wasn't promised at all, wasn't mentioned at all in that oath. In order to deal and to answer with this question, Rashi brings the word v'niksa, that she'll be cleansed. And Rashi says, mimayim hama'orim, from these waters that cause a curse. V'loyoid, and not only that, ela v'nizra zera, she'll bear seed, and that if she gave birth with pain, etc. What Rashi is telling us is, what Rashi is emphasizing is, that when the Torah says v'nizra zera, it's not just saying some reward that she is going to be getting now because of the disgrace that she had to endure, that she had to go through. The pasuk is telling us that v'nizra zera, the seed that she's going to bear, is a direct result. It's an effect. It's coming from these waters themselves, the mayim ha'ma'arim themselves. That means that not only is the water not going to bring any trouble, any punishment, and in other words, there won't be waters of curse anymore, but on the contrary, as Rashi says, v'loy oid, not only won't they bring problems, ella, instead the water themselves are going to bring about bracha, the opposite of the curse. And what is that? That v'nizra azara. And that's why Rashi is saying the words v'niksa, and he adds mimayim ha'ma'arim, which we asked, why does Rashi have to say that? It's not so much to negate other ways how we would understood v'niksa, the previous ways how we suggested from other Mefarshim. Rather, it's to emphasize that the v'nizra zera that comes afterwards is as a result of these waters of the mayim ha'ma'arim. So again, the translation is v'niksa. She will be cleansed mimayim ha'ma'arim, from these mayim ha'ma'arim, and that itself will cause her. The water itself will cause her v'nizra zera. In other words, v'nizra zera is part of v'niksa mimayim ha'ma'arim. And therefore, it's not a question why the Torah didn't say before, when the Kohen is administering the oath, that he didn't promise her that v'nizra zera, because the Kohen did say in a general way, he naki, you will be cleansed mimayim ha'ma'arim, from these bitter waters. And then the pasuk is telling us that he naki mimei ha'ma'arim, when she does come clean from the mayim ha'ma'arim. What does that include? Coming clean also includes that the water itself will bring v'nizra zera, that she will bear seed. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand why Rashi translates v'nizra zera, that if she was giving birth with pain, she will give birth easily now. If she was giving birth to darker children, she will now give birth to lighter children. Why is that? Since Rashi is saying that v'nizra zera is coming from the water itself. Again, it's not a separate bracha. The water itself is now bringing these brachas, instead of them having the opposite effect, if she would have done the Aveira. Instead, they are bringing now brachas. So it makes sense to say that the way they're going to have an effect in the positive way is similar to what it would have had the effect in the opposite. That is, just like when it was bringing negativity. What would the mayim ha'ma'arim bring? It would cause not only that she should be eliminated from the world, as Rashi says, ha'ma'arim means that it eliminates her, gets her out of the world, it would kill her. But furthermore, it was in a way of tsar, it was in a way of pain, of suffering. Her stomach swells and her thigh falls. That's what the water would have done. So this water is now going to have an effect to bracha in a similar way, but rather in the other way around. That not only is she going to be having children with v'nizra zera, but the way she's going to have children is the opposite of painful. In other words, before it would have caused pain, and now it's causing the opposite. That if she was till now giving birth with pain, she's going to give birth easily now. And so too, Rashi says if she was giving birth to darker children, she's going to give birth to lighter children. In other words, this is also something to do with what the water would have done. The water would have caused her face darkening, as described in Chazal, what happens to her, when she drinks the water, and that would have brought all the suffering of her stomach swelling and her thigh falling, etc. So instead of that darkening of causing the darkening in her, now just the opposite, her children are going to be light children. Whereas these other things that Chazal bring, these other brachas, that if she was having girls, she would have boys. If she was having short children, she's going to have tall children. And so to having 2 children instead of 1, or having children every year instead of every second year. All these things don't have any characteristics that are in some way connected and similar to what would have happened with the water had she done the Aveira. Says the Rebbe, this idea that V'nizra Azara is not just a reward or a payment, but rather it's as a result of the water itself, of these water that seemingly could have had something negative in them, and now they're going to bring the opposite. Says the Rebbe, this fits very much also with the inner idea of what a soita is all about. In the beginning of this whole section, on the pasuk Ishki Sister Ishte, if a person's man goes astray, Chazal tell us the word sister is in the word shtus. A person doesn't do an aveira unless a spirit of foolishness overcame him. In other words, soita is really hinting to the whole idea of the spirit of foolishness that allows a person and causes a person to do any aveira. And this is really what the whole idea of the husband warning the wife and the wife hiding, what this all means in spiritual avoida, that a yid, Chas v'shalom, when he turns away from Hashem, who is considered the husband of Knesset Yisrael, even though the husband had warned her, even though the Eibishter had warned the Yidden, he told them, Al tistri, don't go into hiding. He said, don't, lo yiyilcha, you shouldn't have any other avodah zaros, etc. And yet, the Yid is going and hiding out with a foreign person. The Yid is going and going to the Yetzer Hara. So that's what the idea of a soita is. What is v'niksa v'nizra azera? I mean, she comes out clean. This represents the idea of tshuva. Because through tshuva, not only is the person becoming clean from the tumah of the aveira, but furthermore, he's now going to be even much greater than before. As the famous Maimer Azalda tells us, B'makom shemalei tshuva, the word shemalei tshuva stand, the tzaddikim gemurim don't stand. And this is what Rashi is telling us according to the deeper pshat. That the v'nizra azera, in other words, that which is going to be the benefit that comes out of all of this. In other words, the aliyah that comes through tshuva is not just a side benefit or a side point that comes out. It's coming from the water itself, from the negativity itself. In other words, the aliyah, the ascent, is connected with the fact that we're transforming the negativity into good and the bitter into sweet. As Chazal says, doinos, the intentional averis are turning into zochiyus, into merits. Says that, but this is the inner reason why this idea of a nizra zera only says at the very end, when it's actually coming out practically, and it wasn't mentioned earlier in the time when the kohen is administering the oath, etc. Because this idea that from the yerida itself, the descent itself, the aveira itself, the soita, is eventually that itself will be transformed into the greatest aliyah, and it'll be even greater than before the sin, that can't actually say explicitly before one does tshuva. Because before the Yid does tshuva, if a person says, I'll do the Aveira and then, I'll have the benefit of tshuva, so then we're told, Ema speaking, he's not given the chance to do tshuva. You're not allowed to do an Aveira with the calculation that because of this, I'm going to come out with a greater level of tshuva. So that's why it doesn't say it right away. It's only once it happened already, and the person does tshuva b'poil. Then, at that point, it becomes revealed that the whole point of it was not only that the person should come as innocent and clean as before the Aveira, but v'nizra zera, to bear seed, meaning to come to even a greater level than before. And like these things that Rashi says, berevach, things should be easily, and levonim and white, which obviously is all connected to the idea of tshuva, and so on. Says the Rebbe, and Yisrael, oisin tshuva, when the Yidden do tshuva, immediately are redeemed. That instead of all the pain and of the birth pangs of Mashiach, there becomes the revach, things in a comfortable and easy way. Instead of the blackness of Golus, as it says that the faces of the Yidden became as dark as the bottom of a pot. There becomes white, the idea of the oil of the Geula. And this comfort and this whiteness, this brightness, starts already even before the Geula, in the very last moments of Golus. As just like we left Mitzrayim, that even while the Yidden were in Mitzrayim, even before the Geula, already the enslavement was bottled and all the pain was bottled, and furthermore the Yidden had light wherever they were, and we go to the Gula Mitzvah Shleim in a way of Beshuva v'Nachas, all in a comfortable and easy way, Tivashen, you will be saved, or B'Meheira v'Yameinu Mamash.